Hey, somebody needs to put on their body armor. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer is sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the sheer variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV is just incredible. Hustler turf equipment, all those zero-turn mowers, the entire line of Echo power tools, and of course Tucker ATV has every make and model of Polaris ATVs, from the smaller ones to the monster big Ranger Cruise. And you have to see the showroom with taxidermy, antique displays, and an indoor porch with a porch swing, comfortable chairs, recliners, television, free coffee. Stop in and meet Shannon and Lisa Tucker. They treat customers like family, which is why folks from 14 states have done business with Tucker ATV. Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama. Tucker ATV, the small town business with the national reputation. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And as you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with observations and answers. And we have that today in spades. We have a return guest, a guy that, you know, when I talk to this guy, I feel like his friend. You know, he has the great gift of drawing you in just talking. And his stories are unbelievable. Former SEAL sniper, #1 New York Times bestseller, had the #1 show on Netflix. More going on than any human should be allowed to have. Please welcome Jack Carr. Jack, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, the feeling is mutual. So thanks for always being so wonderful, and it's great to be here. I really appreciate you having me.
Man, you are maybe our first guest that I think Jack may have more books than I have. You know, everybody else, I'm sure I beat them, but oh my gosh,
and this is just one room. So
that's just the nonfiction side, right?
This is the nonfiction side, except for my stuff here and the Ian Fleming stuff. But other than that, everything else is fiction in here. And then the other room is all the fiction. So what I'm doing is going back and all those books that I read growing up that I had to wait for the paperback to come out for. I still have most of those, like a Nelson DeMille Charm School or something like that. Well, now I collect them now. And so now I have that one that I read back in, let's say, 8th grade or whenever I read that one. But now I have the first edition signed in there. So I have both. I have the one from when I was a kid that I held on to because we were just talking, we don't give books away, or it's pretty special if we do.
Right.
And so now I'm building the fiction side with all those books that I read growing up, but now collecting the first editions signed of them because they made such an impact on me growing up. And not just this nonfiction stuff in here, which I was reading even back then, but all those authors, the Nelson DeMille and David Morrell and A.J. Quinnell and J.C. Pollock and Mark Gold and Tom Clancy, all these guys, Robert Ludlum, all these guys who are masters in the art of storytelling had a huge impact on my life. So now, as a way to honor them and what they essentially left behind for me in many cases, this foundation that they built for me to do what I'm doing now, I can get their book and put it in a place of honor in there because they were that meaningful, had that big of an impact on my life. So first edition signs go in the other room there. But I do like having those old paperbacks too. There's that smell to them. You know, they're traveled. In my case, they've had them since the 80s. And so I love having both of them in there.
Yeah,
so.
in my restroom in my home office, I have a wall of paperbacks. I just stacked them in there, and they are the wall. And, you know, you mentioned Charm School. God, I love that book.
Such a great book.
That was a huge book to me.
So, I wish they had made the movie of it back then while we were still in the Cold War, even at the end, like even if they'd squeezed it in there right at the end in 89, 90, you know, right in that time frame. Because to remake it today, it's one of the things that I think about. I have a list of things that I would be willing to look at to remake as a producer, writer, and that's on my list. But every time I think of that one, I think, oh my goodness, how wonderful, cool would that have been to watch that as a seventh grader, eighth grader, early high school years during the Cold War, to see that book brought to life on screen. Same thing with Louis L'Amour's Last of the Breed. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
goodness,
yeah,
that would have
yeah,
been
yeah.
so great to see that at the height of the Cold War as a kid being in sixth grade and watching this guy's stealth plane get shot down over Siberia and thrown into concentration or the gulag, and then escaping and going on the run and having some Rambo action in there. And oh my goodness. But some of these things they just kind of missed the window on. Those were perfect times in history to turn those things, to adapt those books into film. And now going back, there's a couple of things. If you went back to do those today, obviously the time is a little different. So now you're doing it as a period piece, and it just doesn't have that like urgency that it would have had when we all thought we were gonna be like Wolverines and Red Dawn one day and have to
Right,
run
right,
the
right.
mountains because the Soviets were gonna fly over, and all of a sudden we're gonna look up and see these parachutes. So it's just a little, we don't have that sense of urgency that we had back then that would have made it even more thrilling. So there's just some of those ones like that just kind of missed their time, I think. And also we have too many distractions today. So if you're a sixth grader today and well, you can play a video game for weeks on end. You can watch any show in the history of shows, even though they're not really interested in shows and movies as much. They like the TikToks and YouTube and all that sort of thing. Even though every movie and TV show is available anytime, they're not waiting till 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night for their show to come on and hoping
Right.
that their parents let them stay up for that 10 o'clock one. Whether it's like Magnum PI or Airwolf or Miami Vice or whatever Riptide, whatever it might have been back then. Now it's just a little different. It doesn't seem like kids are as interested in television and films the way that a lot of us were growing up, where we looked forward to that weekend and getting dropped off at the movie theater for a 7:30 or 9 o'clock show or whatever it might have been, or even waiting on a Thursday night for Magnum to come on. You had to wait. You had to
Yeah.
exercise patience, and you had to do something in the meantime. Hence the books and reading. So
I
it's
told
just a
my
little different today.
I told my sons they were, we're big college football fans, and so I said, you know how you wait for that game, and how what time is the game, and what channel is it on, and
Yeah.
and you're doing that kind of all week. That's the way we used to be about everything on TV, everything. But now, you can. I mean, now there's so many shows. I saw some Danny DeVito thing, and I picked up the DVD or whatever the thing was, and I looked, and it was a series that he's in, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know he had a new series, and I was looking at season 5.
Um,
He's been in a show for 5 years, and I didn't even know about it. I don't. I guess I don't read that stuff, but there's just so much
so
stuff.
much. Yeah.
It's hard to push through the clutter, but you have. I mean, you have as a person, you have as an author, as a producer. I mean, I read Terminal List before I knew who you were, and I thought, this is really, really good, because I read your kind of books, and there's a lot of average ones out there, but there are a few. You, Mark Graney, Brad Thor, that have really risen to the top of this pack, and now you're starting a series, and the series is called Targeted.
Yep.
And the first one is Beirut, about the Marine barracks bombing. But this book, this is a huge, not really a leap, but it's a huge departure, I guess. And it's out today.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we have a lot of history into the pages of my thrillers anyway. And I'm so glad you like the Terminal List. And I think people always ask me what's my favorite one. And it's the last one. It's always been the latest one to come out, because my goal as an author, just like anything in life, is to get better and always improve. In the SEAL teams, my goal was to always be a better leader and operator today than I was yesterday. So what work am I putting in to get there? And same thing with the thriller. So my latest thriller, Red Sky Morning, that came out in June, that's by far my favorite, because I think it's better than the ones that preceded it.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm critical of writing. I don't like being distracted by bad writing, because I'm ADD anyway, and so to get distracted by something, it bugs me. But I've just paid a special interest in your writing because I liked Terminal List, and it was the first one. And so, when it's a comedy record, you don't want to get a comedian's second record, because he's spent his life to come up with that first hour. And then as soon as that first hour hits, now they're saying, come on, we got to have some more material. And so it takes 6 months to come up with the next hour, and it's usually horrible, and he figures it out. And then the third and fourth album are fine. But you look at comedians throughout history, that second album is horrible. And it happens sometimes with writers, because they use their good thoughts. They've been keeping notes for years. But your second book was noticeably better. I mean, and I liked the first one.
Thank you.
And then Red Sky Morning, I read that a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I agree with you. It's the best one.
Thank you.
So now you're starting over with a nonfiction series. And I got to tell people, if you wonder if it's work to write a book, I want you to look at the notes. These are notes.
Yeah.
I mean, golly, that must be 100 pages of single-spaced notes.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, that's a lot of right there. That part right there. There's notes.
But how did you get started doing this? Because you and James Scott are doing it. He's the guy that was nominated for Pulitzer Prizes. And so you guys are both, you're both quality, accomplished writers, but then he probably has a research mode. You've got a real world mode on this. Yeah. So how did y'all decide to make Beirut your first one?
Yeah, it's a great team, and James is amazing. And I'll get to how I chose him, or I asked him, and thank goodness he said yes. But I weave a lot of history into my thrillers anyway, just because I'm a student of history, just like I'm a student of warfare, student of this profession, writing, always trying to improve, like I talked about. But I also, because of that interest in history and using it to add flavor to the narratives, give background, even if it's just a sentence here or there for a character's background. I always liked growing up, when I read those novels that we talked about, if there was a sentence in there that I understood by context, but maybe didn't quite get the exact reference. And I loved that, because I thought, well, one, it made that writer to me seem more informed than maybe than he was. Who knows? But I thought, this is something I should know about. It really, I'm curious by nature, but it really spurred that on, and I liked that in these books, because you didn't. If there was something out of context that someone would think, maybe most editors would say, "Hey, you need to explain this more. This right. Sentence doesn't make sense." That's okay, and so I keep those in mind as well, because I liked those. I liked that if I make a reference to, and here's something that everyone has heard of, like Bay of Pigs. I shouldn't have to go and talk about it, but for someone who's reading it, they might think, I should know a little bit more about this. But I understand it by context. It's not thrown in there to make anyone feel uninformed. It does. Right. You don't need to understand. You understand it by the context of the story in that paragraph, in that chapter. So I use history that way. I use it in my social media a lot. I don't want people to forget about these different events in history, especially when we're so distracted today. And we don't do a very good job in this country of taking the lessons of the past and apply them to problem sets of the present as wisdom. And so I thought the very least that I can do as an author is try to capture some of these events, the lessons learned, try to humanize them at the same time, so that people can go to those books whether they do or not. And at least those lessons are captured. At least they're there.
Right.
And so that was I thought when I got to the certain stage about 2.5 years ago, I guess it was, when I pitched, maybe it was three, when I pitched, I thought I built up enough political capital with book sales at Simon and Schuster, where I could pitch something else. And so I brought them this idea for targeted, looking into different terrorist attacks, capturing those lessons, humanizing the events, and also Beirut 1983. I kept coming back to that one because as I wrote out this idea, I wrote down about 3 pages of different terrorist events, probably from the end of World War II up to today, or the day that I did that, wrote those out. And so there's a lot. Unfortunately, there's a lot. But I kept coming back to Beirut 1983 because it is such a turning point in our relationship with the Middle East vis-a-vis our foreign policy. And as a kid, I remember those Time magazine and Newsweek magazine covers that were on our dining room table. I remember when this happened. I remember watching the news with my parents. I remember the newspapers that would come across. And so for me as a young kid, I already knew my path. I knew I was going into the military, and I knew that the war, my generation's war, would have something to do with terrorism. And then here it is in Beirut, 241 Americans dead. And it really was a turning point for our relationship with the Middle East. And what we did in the aftermath of that event, which was talk tough, but then leave quietly in 1984. And so it got the end result that this proxy force in Iran wanted, and really became the model for their relationship with Israel and the United States moving forward, to say nothing of other terrorist organizations who took the same lessons. But when you hear something like 241 Americans dead, especially before the age of social media, even 24-hour news cycles, it's tough to humanize something like that. And so I wanted to make sure that I got out of the way of these stories, because it's not my book, it's not my story, it's not James's story. These are the stories of the people who were there, the people who were buried in the rubble, who were dug out, barely survived. These are the stories of the people who didn't make it home, whose families have an empty seat at that dinner table to this day. So it had multi-generational impacts as well. And I wanted to capture the strategic lessons learned as well, because those people at the executive level, at these senior levels of government, the decisions they make up there, well, the final decision maker in this chain that starts with the president ends up being an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid with a rifle off safe, finger on the trigger, as a car is approaching a checkpoint somewhere in the world. And they're looking at it, and does it look like that it's weighed down by explosives? Or is it just bad suspension? Well, they're the final decision maker in that chain that starts all the way up at the top, that puts Marines ashore, in this case, in really an untenable, tactically disadvantageous position, and hands them this mission. So I wanted to make sure that I grabbed that as well, that people understood that those people at the top of this chain are making decisions that are going to impact not just the lives of the people on the ground, but their families, and thereby multi-generational effects. So I pitched it to Simon & Schuster. They love the idea. And I said, as you so poignantly pointed out, that there are a lot of notes in here. So I wanted to work with someone who knew what they were doing in the nonfiction space, because in a thriller, if I get something wrong, even if it's historically, incorrect, although I don't think there's anything really in there like that, but if there were, I could just say, hey, it's fiction. It's fiction. That could be your response. It does. But for this, when you're telling somebody's story, someone who's alive that's still dealing with the emotional, in some cases, physical trauma of this event, when you have family members, sons that grew up without fathers, you have widows, you have moms and dads who lost their children. When you're dealing with something like that, you have to get it right. You have to get it right. You have to honor those people by getting their story right. So hence, James Scott. Amazing guy. And I didn't know that at the time. I just loved his work. His 5 other books out there, 4 on World War II. And I thought, I love this guy's work. This is amazing. This is who I want to partner with. But I had no idea if he'd want to do it, if he had time to do it. I didn't know because he seemed so serious from the books that I didn't even watch an interview with him. But I should have watched a podcast or something, but I didn't. It was solely about the work. And I'm talking to my publisher and my agent, and they said, "Who do you want to partner with?" And I said, "Oh, this guy, James Scott. He seems like he would be amazing if he'd do it." And they said, "Well, who's his agent?" And I got in I had his last book right there. So I was looking in the acknowledgments or looking in the author's note. And I said, "Well, he's thanking somebody named John Glussman." And my publisher, Emily Bessler, says, "What? that's my husband. And so they put us together, and now we're dear friends and did this project together, and are going to do we're in the beginning stages of another one right now. But also as part of that, I told Simon and Schuster as part of my pitch that I wanted to do one a year. And about 2 weeks into this process, I called them back and said, I know what I said, I know what the contract said, but in order to do these stories justice, it's going to be at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And of course, no problem. But I mean, if you could spit one out every year with nonfiction, that's tough. And I didn't want it to be like pop kind of nonfiction. I wanted it to be
Right.
approachable, but I didn't want it to be just what other people had written in other books and then just kind of regurgitated in these pages. I
Exactly.
wanted to go into the Reagan Library archives. I wanted to look at recently declassified documents. I wanted to do all these interviews. I wanted to read the letters that people had sent home from Beirut. In some cases, tapes. You can hear their voices. Look at those photos, and really and make an actual work of history. And having James Scott, who's so good at all that sort of thing, like you said, has the process for research, knows how to legally annotate everything.
Right.
The
Yeah.
photos, I never really thought about the photos before, and how there it is right there, the can't shoot back saloon. That says a lot about what was going on over there for these guys who were in combat, really from the day they got there until this event, when the administration, of course, is saying, no, these are peacekeepers, they're not in combat, that sort of a thing. But
Yeah.
just getting the photos is tough. And some of the photos I wanted were the company. It was like, it wasn't Getty, maybe it was AP. It was one of these that you know the name of, but it had changed hands so many times since 1983. They didn't even know who owned the rights to the photos, which was remarkable to me because the whole business is licensing photos.
Go ahead
And I
and put
wanted to
them
pay
out.
them.
You'll find out pretty quick who owns them, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's a trap. So we couldn't use those. We could only use the ones that we got permission for. But there were some. I'm like, I'm trying to pay your company who has the photo. I'm trying to give you money so that I can use these. Isn't that what you do? And they said, yeah, so much time's passed and we've been sold 4 times. We're not really sure who owns that. As the Marine Corps just puts on like originally taken by whatever AP or whatever, and they don't really care. But for us, we have to do it right. So I wanted to work with someone who really knew what they were doing, was an established historian, an actual military historian, and in this case, James is a Pulitzer Prize finalist and also an amazing guy. So we got to work together, and could not be really more proud of this, but more so because the people that we write about it in here and their families trusted us with these stories. And so for me, it was extremely humbling to get to know some of these guys.
You know, this book is curious to me because as you mentioned, when you were writing down the list of terrorist acts to show your publisher, you know, there were terrorist acts in the Civil War. There are terrorist acts in the Revolutionary War. But this book seems to be the origin story of what we call terrorism. Would that be fair? Is this like, I mean, do you think that the Beirut thing was that was the bell ringing about this stuff?
To a certain extent, because it was a spectacular event. I don't like using that word, but that's the word that's used when you describe a terrorist event that captures essentially the world headlines. So a spectacular event. We go back to Munich as well. That was a spectacular event.
Yeah, Munich too. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, but it was, that was targeting Israeli athletes. So for the United States, and of course we had the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis. That was one that was on the list. And I thought, there's been so much done about that. And that was really a point where our foreign policy vis-a-vis the Middle East, Iran specifically, hadn't really been worked out yet. Of course, Shah, Ayatollah, we have Iranian hostage crisis. We have Desert One with Delta Force trying to go in and rescue our hostages. And then they're released when Reagan, of course, takes office. But it was still murky. There was not too much murky about what was going on in the aftermath of Beirut. Our foreign policy certainly changed. The shadow still looms large today because of what happened in Beirut. And you're right, there were terrorist events all throughout 60s, 70s. And when we talk about terrorism, really, there's a few different definitions, which makes talking about terrorism difficult because oftentimes people say terrorism when they mean something else. But we had the embassy bombing in April, and then we had this summer, and I was well aware of our embassy bombing in April. I was well aware of the Marine barracks and headquarters bombing in October. But even as someone who was in tune with terrorism because of my just well one growing up knowing what I was going to do later in life and so wanting to have an education, a foundation from which to make decisions, I wasn't really aware of what was happening between April and October, and it was just a kind of a space where I wasn't really aware of too much going on. There was a lot going on the ground, and these guys were in combat between April and October. The death toll certainly points to that. But the administration, they would say things along the lines of, well, was it direct fire or indirect fire? Because they were trying to keep these Marines as peacekeepers, and they didn't want the American public to think that these guys were in actual combat over there. They were in a peacekeeping role, not a great role for the Marine Corps.
Like Vietnam was a police action, yeah.
Like kind of like that. And Marine Corps goes in, crushes the enemy. Like that's a good Marine Corps job to do that. Peacekeepers, not so much. And then to put them in this tactically disadvantageous position that essentially made them targets, and had some rules of engagement intended to keep them as peacekeepers.
I got the inference on the sign, the can't shoot back saloon.
Exactly. And the guys had people killed by snipers, by mortars. And this whole Lebanon just disintegrated around them. Beirut in particular just disintegrated around them. And these poor guys were right in the thick of it. And I talked to Michael Reagan about it, and he said that this event haunted his father till the day he died. And you can see that also. And that was really cool as well. Being able to humanize President Reagan, you really got the sense that he had a big heart. Like he was a good human. He had a really good heart.
Right.
And then you also saw some things I found out some things I didn't expect. I didn't realize that he didn't like, I guess, arguments within the cabinet, amongst his advisors. He didn't like that. And maybe a situation like this would have lent itself to a little more argument that you're present for. You have people that are your advisors there to give you their best, their best guidance, their best counsel. That's what they're there for. But he didn't like that. He didn't like that the arguments. So I think it would have benefited. The Marines would have benefited perhaps from a little more arguments.
That was the entertainer coming out in Reagan. You know, I want people to like me. Don't fight around me. Don't fight. Come on, guys.
And I get it too. Yeah. I
get it. Because it's got that's got to be horribly uncomfortable. But he's president. So I agree with you.
Today I don't like arguing today. Maybe it's just because I have kids. But I think it's more that 20 years in the SEAL teams type of a thing, and I just would
a logical hashing of the facts. Yeah,
I'd rather just not fight. So I learned a lot in the course of doing this research, and also another reason why I chose Beirut over maybe a couple other events. Iran 1979. There's been a lot written about that. There's been movies, documentaries. You can point to multiple books. When someone asks you, hey, what should I read on Beirut 1983? I want to read something about the Beirut barracks bombing. There wasn't really that one book that pops to mind. You can say, oh, you got to read this one, or there are with some other events. And that was another reason that really hadn't been explored yet. There were some books in the past, a couple, but they were told from that person's perspective. So it was high time to look into this event and really dive in and try to paint this picture and do those things at the operational strategic levels, and then humanize it at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, it's out today. Beirut. Targeted Beirut's the first in a series, and you're going to love this. Jack Carr, thank you for being with us. Who does the audiobook?
Ray Porter. So same guy that does the my thrillers does this, and he's just fantastic. What an amazing guy he is. He was Dark Side for those who are fans of that universe, the DC universe, Justice League, and he's a Shakespearean trained actor and such a good guy. Such a good human being. So I just love Ray Porter, and people love to listen to him. So he's narrating the book.
That's awesome, man. I'm a fan of his too. And you sound like a great guy to work with, because everybody you got working with, they're great people. I mean, I watched a team get crushed last weekend on the football field, and they've got kind of a new coach, and he is one of, I think, the three best coaches coaching now in college football. But his team got crushed. And I told a friend who lives up in that area, I said, first of all, this coach is a great human being. We need great human beings in this profession. And I think he's an incredible coach. I just hope the fans give him a chance. But he went, to the press conference afterwards, and he gave the full Bear Bryant, man. He said, you ever had an ass whooping? Well, we had one today. This was this
that's
was
ownership of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said we got a lot to work on, and that includes me. And because that's what Bear Bryant did. If they won, it was because these guys have good mamas and daddies, and they raised their character, and they have heart. But if they lost, he would say, obviously the boys weren't prepared for this. Preparation is a coach's job, and I'm the head coach. So this is my mistake. This is my disaster. He would always give the credit, take the blame. And that's what I saw this coach do.
Yeah, that's what you got. Same thing, military. Got to push that credit down the chain of command. And if anything happens, though, then you take full responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Commanding officer told me a long time ago. He said, when people say, "Hey, oh, you're so lucky," it's luck is the residue of preparation, is what he told us, and that was gear up to get ready to go to Afghanistan, get ready to go to Iraq. So luck is the residue of preparation. I always liked that.
That's a good one. That's a good one to put in front of your other series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, lead off another one.
Thanks for being with us, Jack. I appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are and how much you travel and your family, and now you're putting out a book and a half every year. So
here we go. Yeah. Go. But I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much. Love talking to you. So thank you so much.
Well, I want to urge people, go ahead and get this. I mean, get two of them. You've got a friend who's going to love it. And so you got a great new book and a great gift. And so get them and look at the show notes. We've got every way you can contact and follow Jack. And so, Jack, again, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Take care.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. MREs for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by Surly Acres, the exclusive retirement community for grouchy senior citizens. Do you know an elderly person who is always in a bad mood? Perhaps it's time for you to share with them the good news about Surly Acres. The Surly Acres staff doesn't just put up with the crotchety oldsters, they cater to them by providing legitimate experiences to gripe and complain about. Every weekday afternoon between the hours of 3 and 5, our staff has arranged children to play on lawns all across the community, presenting untold numbers of our members to scream, "Get off my grass!" at the youngsters. After hours, loud, unintelligible music is played from our speaker trucks driving slowly up and down streets. But that's not all. We have a designated phone number that residents can call to complain about anything at all. And operators are standing by, just waiting to provoke the caller by cussing and hanging up. You think you've heard Grandpa's irritated comments about food? Wait till you hear what he says when we serve him our food. It's truly horrific, but you get what you pay for. And at Surly Acres, while yes, it's expensive, we don't miss a trick. When it comes to hospitality, service, and all-around quality, we are the best at providing the worst. That's Surly Acres, where our motto is, we'll give you something to complain about. Surly Acres. Contact us at 1-800-BAD-MOOD or log on to surlyacres.com.